Cover-up makeup had become my specialty over the past 6 months. Foundation 3 shades darker than my natural skin, layered thick over the purple fingerprints circling my left wrist. Concealer patted carefully along my collarbone, where Tyler's grip had left marks like a necklace I never asked for. The long-sleeved gray shirt I wore to work hid most of it, even though the kitchen at Rossi's was hot enough to make me sweat through my uniform by hour 3. Friday nights were chaos. The upscale Italian restaurant in downtown Chicago attracted a specific crowd. Businessmen closing deals over expensive wine, couples celebrating anniversaries, families spending money they wanted everyone to see them spending. I was 25 years old, 1 semester away from finishing my nursing degree, and I served them all with a smile that felt painted on as thick as the makeup. "Table 12 needs water," Marco, the floor manager, barked as he passed. "And fix your hair. You look exhausted." I was exhausted. Tyler had kept me up until 3 a.m., pacing our apartment, throwing accusations like punches until the actual punches came. My crime this time, refusing to quit school. He wanted me home, available, dependent. The nursing program was my escape plan, though I'd never said that out loud. 6 more months until graduation. 6 more months until I could support myself and Megan without relying on tips and Tyler's increasingly unpredictable moods. I tucked a strand of light brown hair back into my ponytail and grabbed the water pitcher. My reflection in the polished chrome surface showed shadows under my blue-gray eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. 25 going on 50, my classmate had joked last week. She'd meant it kindly, but the truth stung. Table 12 was in the VIP section, cordoned off by velvet ropes and ambient lighting that cost more to install than I made in 6 months. 4 men sat there, all wearing dark suits that fit with the kind of precision that meant tailored, not bought off a rack. The air around them felt different, charged with the kind of authority that made other diners instinctively lower their voices when passing nearby. The man at the head of the table made me pause mid-step. He was maybe 33, with black hair styled back from a face that belonged on old Italian paintings in museums. Strong features, a jawline that could cut glass, and eyes so dark they looked black in the restaurant's dim lighting. A thin scar traced along the left side of his chin, white against olive skin. His suit jacket hung on the back of his chair. White shirt open at the collar, revealing a thick gold chain that caught the light when he moved. I'd served hundreds of wealthy men. This one felt different. Dangerous, maybe, or just powerful in a way that didn't need volume or theatrics. "Water?" I offered, keeping my voice steady. "Please," he said. His accent was subtle, American, but shaped by something else underneath. Italian heritage, probably, given the restaurant choice and the gold chain. And menus for my associates. I distributed menus, filled water glasses, went through my rehearsed spiel about tonight's specials. The man at the head of the table, the one with the scar, didn't look at his menu. He watched me instead. And not in the way customers usually did. Not assessing, not objectifying. Observing. Like he was reading a language written in my posture and movements. "I'll give you a few minutes to decide," I said, already backing away. Back in the kitchen, I pressed my palms against the stainless steel counter, trying to slow my heartbeat. The heat from the industrial ovens made the air thick, hard to breathe. Maria, another server, gave me a concerned look while plating desserts. "You okay, Hannah?" "Fine. Just tired." "Table 12 is Dominic Marino," she whispered, glancing toward the VIP section through the kitchen window. "He owns half the Italian businesses on the north side. Be extra careful with them. Marco's been stressed all week knowing he was coming." I nodded, filed the information away, and went back to work. Over the next hour, I served appetizers, entrees, more wine. Dominic Marino remained quiet throughout, letting his associates carry the conversation while he ate with precise, economical movements. But I felt his attention tracking me even when I wasn't at their table. Every time I passed nearby, every time I served another section, those dark eyes found me. It should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt like being seen for the first time in months. I was clearing their appetizer plates when it happened. My sleeve caught on the edge of a water glass. I grabbed for it, overcorrected, and stumbled. The tray tilted dangerously, 6 expensive wine glasses sliding toward catastrophe. Dominic's hand shot out faster than I could process, catching my elbow, steadying me before disaster struck. "Careful," he said quietly. His grip was firm, but not painful. Nothing like Tyler's hands, which always squeezed too hard, left marks that lasted days. This was controlled strength, power that chose restraint. But in steadying me, he'd pushed my sleeve up past my wrist. The bruises were visible, unmistakable. 4 distinct finger marks, purple fading to yellow at the edges, circling my arm like a brand. Dominic's eyes dropped to my wrist, then rose to my face. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Something shifted in his expression, a coldness settling in that made the air feel heavier, more dangerous. "Who did that to you?" The question came out flat, but underneath it ran something volcanic. His 3 associates had stopped talking, all attention suddenly on our interaction. "I'm sorry," I stammered, pulling my arm back, tugging the sleeve down with my free hand. "I'm fine. It's nothing. That's not nothing. I hit it on a door. Stupid accident. I'm clumsy sometimes." His dark eyes held mine for 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. He knew I was lying. I knew he knew. But something in his face told me he wouldn't push, wouldn't force me to admit what we both understood. "Be more careful," he said finally, releasing my arm with deliberate gentleness. "Doors can be dangerous." The way he said doors made it clear we were no longer talking about furniture. I finished clearing their table with shaking hands, hyper-aware of his attention tracking my every movement for the rest of the meal. He noticed when I adjusted my sleeve 3 times in as many minutes. Noticed when I flinched at Marco's raised voice from across the room. Noticed the careful way I carried heavy trays, favoring my left side where my ribs still ached from Tuesday's argument. When I brought the check, I expected him to say something else, to push the issue. He didn't. Just signed the receipt with elegant script, stood, and buttoned his jacket with practiced ease. His associates filed out first, nodding respectfully to him before leaving. Dominic paused beside the table, and I realized he'd left something behind. $500 bills sat folded under his water glass, crisp and new. Underneath, a business card with embossed lettering on the front and a phone number written in neat script on the back. "In case you ever need help with any more doors," he said, meeting my eyes one last time. "Day or night. That number reaches me directly." Then he walked out, moving through the restaurant with the kind of presence that made people step aside without conscious thought. I stood there with trembling hands, staring at a tip that represented 2 weeks of work and a business card that felt heavier than it should. Marco appeared at my elbow within seconds, eyes wide. "What did you do to earn that?" "Nothing," I said truthfully. "I didn't do anything." But as I pocketed the card and the money, I knew that wasn't entirely accurate. Dominic Marino had seen something in those bruises, something that triggered a response I didn't fully understand. Recognition, maybe. Or rage on behalf of someone he didn't even know. The rest of my shift passed in a blur. I served tables, smiled at customers, avoided Marco's suspicious glances. But my mind kept returning to that moment when Dominic's hand had caught my arm. The careful way he'd held me, like I was something fragile that might break with too much pressure. Tyler had never touched me like that. Not even in the beginning, when things were good. His hands always took, demanded, controlled. This stranger's hands had steadied, protected, then released without expectation. By the time I clocked out at midnight, October rain had started falling, turning Chicago's streets slick and reflecting neon signs in distorted colors. I pulled my thin jacket tighter, already dreading the bus ride home and whatever mood Tyler would be in when I got there. The business card sat in my wallet, right behind my driver's license where I'd see it every time I looked. I should have thrown it away. Should have taken the tip as luck and forgotten the whole encounter. Should have known better than to accept anything from a man like Dominic Marino, whose name Maria had spoken with a mixture of respect and fear. Instead, I traced my fingers over the embossed letters as I waited for the bus, memorizing the number on the back even though I told myself I'd never use it, just in case, because for the first time in 6 months, someone had noticed. Someone had seen past the smile and the makeup and the lies about doors. And that small recognition felt like oxygen after months of suffocating. The bus arrived, doors hissing open. I climbed aboard, found a seat near the back, and watched Chicago blur past the rain-streaked windows. Tomorrow, I had an 8-hour clinical rotation at the hospital, then another shift at Rossi's. Tomorrow, Tyler would probably apologize like he always did, swear it wouldn't happen again like he always did, make promises we both knew he wouldn't keep. But tonight, I had $500 and a phone number, and the memory of dark eyes that had looked at my bruises with something that felt dangerously close to fury. It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd had this morning. Saturday afternoon hit me like a hangover I didn't earn. 4 hours of sleep, clinical rotation at the hospital from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., then straight to Rossi's for a double shift that wouldn't end until midnight. My nursing instructor had pulled me aside after rounds to ask if everything was okay at home. The exhaustion must have shown through the makeup. I'd lied, said I was fine, said I'd been studying late. She hadn't believed me, but she'd let it go. The restaurant was already filling up when I arrived. Chicago's wealthy taking advantage of the unseasonably warm October afternoon. By 6 p.m., every table in my section was full, and Marco was snapping orders at me like I was personally responsible for the kitchen being backed up. I was refilling water glasses at table 7 when I saw him through the front window. Tyler. My stomach dropped so fast I nearly spilled water across the white tablecloth. He was weaving slightly on the sidewalk outside, that particular sway that meant he'd been drinking since noon. His shirt was wrinkled, tie loosened, hair disheveled. He'd clearly come straight from wherever he'd spent his afternoon drowning whatever anger had been festering since our fight. He pushed through the restaurant door with enough force to make the hostess jump back. His eyes scanned the dining room until they found me, and the expression on his face made my blood freeze. "Hannah!" His voice cut through the ambient dinner conversation like a knife. "We need to talk. Now." Marco appeared from the kitchen, his face already red with stress. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice or leave. I'm not talking to you." Tyler shoved past the hostess stand, making his way toward my section. "Hannah, did you hear me?" Diners were staring now. A man at table 4 had his phone out, probably ready to call the police. I set down the water pitcher with shaking hands and moved to intercept Tyler before he could reach deeper into the restaurant. "Tyler, please," I said quietly. "I'm working. We can talk later." "We'll talk now." He grabbed my wrist, the same one Dominic had seen bruised last night. His fingers dug into the tender flesh, making me gasp. "You're my girlfriend. You don't get to ignore my calls all day." "Sir, release her immediately or I'm calling the police," Marco said, but his voice held uncertainty. He was a manager, not security, and Tyler outweighed him by 40 pounds. "She belongs to me," Tyler snarled. "I don't need your permission to talk to what's mine." He yanked me toward the door. I stumbled, nearly falling, and he jerked me upright with enough force to wrench my shoulder. The pain shot down my arm, sharp and immediate. "You're hurting me," I managed. "Good. Maybe you'll remember it next time you think about ignoring me." We burst through the front door into the cooling evening air. Tyler didn't stop on the sidewalk. He dragged me around the corner into the narrow service alley that ran between Rossi's and the neighboring building. Rain from earlier had left puddles on the uneven pavement, trash bins creating shadows in the failing light. He slammed me against the brick wall hard enough to knock the wind from my lungs. His forearm pressed across my throat, cutting off my air supply. The smell of whiskey rolled off him in waves. 2 years, he said, his face inches from mine. 2 years I've supported you, put up with your school nonsense, and this is how you repay me? Flirting with customers? I wasn't, I gasped, trying to push against his arm. "Tyler, I can't breathe. You think I didn't see how you looked at that guy last night? The one who left you that ridiculous tip?" His grip tightened. "You think I'm stupid?" Black spots danced at the edges of my vision. My lungs screamed for oxygen. This was it, I realized with strange clarity. This was how Tyler finally killed me. In an alley behind the restaurant where I'd been trying so hard to build a future without him. Then suddenly, the pressure was gone. Tyler flew backward like he'd been hit by a car, crashing into the opposite wall with a sound that would have been satisfying if I wasn't too busy gasping for air. I collapsed against the brick, hand at my throat, trying to understand what had just happened. Dominic Marino stood in the alley entrance, perfectly still except for his eyes. Those dark eyes that had noticed my bruises last night now tracked Tyler with the kind of focus a wolf gives to wounded prey. He wore a different suit today, charcoal gray, still immaculate despite having just thrown a grown man across an alley. "You made a mistake," Dominic said quietly. Tyler pushed himself upright, too drunk and stupid to recognize the danger he was in. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who doesn't like seeing women treated like property." Tyler laughed, the sound ugly and aggressive. He charged forward, throwing a wild punch that Dominic sidestepped with minimal effort. Before Tyler could recover his balance, 2 other men appeared in the alley. One of them, older with graying hair at his temples, caught Tyler's arm and twisted it behind his back with professional efficiency. "This is none of your business," Tyler grunted, struggling against the hold. "That's my girlfriend." "No," Dominic said, moving toward me. "She's not." He crouched down to my level where I'd slid to sit against the wall, his hands hovering near my shoulders but not touching. "Are you hurt?" I tried to speak, but only managed to cough. My throat felt crushed, each breath painful. Dominic's jaw tightened. He stood, turned back to Tyler with the kind of calm that felt more threatening than any rage. "Luca, take him. He'll be dealt with appropriately." "You can't just take me," Tyler protested, as the man Dominic had called Luca began forcing him toward a black car idling at the alley entrance. "Hannah, tell them we're together." I said nothing, just watched as they loaded him into the back seat like cargo. Dominic returned his attention to me, and this time he did touch, helping me to my feet with the same careful gentleness from last night. "Can you walk?" I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. He kept one hand on my elbow as we made our way back into the restaurant through the rear kitchen entrance. Marco rushed over immediately, taking in my appearance, the red marks already forming on my throat. "Hannah, I'm so sorry. I should have called the police faster." "She needs to go home," Dominic interrupted. His voice held authority that made Marco's mouth snap shut. "I'll see that she gets there safely. Pay her for the full shift." "Of course, Mr. Marino. Of course." I found my purse in the back room, accepted my jacket from Maria, who looked like she wanted to ask questions but didn't dare. Dominic led me out the front door to where another black car waited, driver already behind the wheel. He opened the back door for me, waited until I was settled, then slid in beside me. The car pulled away from the curb smoothly, no squealing tires or dramatic acceleration. Just quiet, professional competence. "Where do you live?" Dominic asked. I gave him the address of my apartment, my voice returning as a raspy whisper. He relayed it to the driver, then turned back to me. "How long?" "What? How long has he been hurting you?" The directness of the question, the way he didn't dance around it or let me pretend, broke something open inside me. 6 months. Maybe longer if you count the verbal stuff. "Why didn't you leave?" I tried. He found me. Convinced me to come back. Said he'd change. I stared at my hands, at the bruises circling my wrist. And I believed him, because it was easier than being alone. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. The Chicago streets slid past the tinted windows, familiar and foreign at the same time. Finally, he spoke. "My father used to beat my mother. Started when I was 5, got worse as I got older. I'd hear her crying in the bathroom at night, see the bruises she'd try to hide." His voice held no emotion, just flat recitation of facts. "When I was 16, I got big enough to stop him. Told him if he ever touched her again, I'd kill him." I looked at him. "Did he?" "No. He died of a heart attack 6 months later. Natural causes, though I can't say I mourned much." He met my eyes. "My mother wasted 20 years on a man who saw her as something to own and break. I swore I'd never let that happen to anyone I could protect. You don't even know me." "I know enough." The car pulled up in front of my building. A tired walk-up in a neighborhood that pretended to be nicer than it was. Dominic got out first, scanned the street with practiced assessment, then opened my door. "Will you be safe here tonight?" "Tyler won't come back," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure of that. "No," Dominic agreed. "He won't." Something in the way he said it made me understand that Tyler Crawford would never bother anyone again. I should have been horrified. Should have demanded to know what dealt with appropriately, actually meant. Instead, I felt the first full breath I'd taken in 6 months. I watched Dominic's car pull away from the curb, taillights disappearing into Chicago's Saturday night traffic. My apartment building stood behind me, 5 stories of weathered brick and broken promises. The street was quiet, too quiet after the chaos of the evening. Tyler's keys were still in my purse. His toothbrush sat in my bathroom. His clothes hung in half my closet. But somehow, standing there alone on the sidewalk, I knew he'd never use any of them again. The knowledge should have terrified me. Instead, I felt nothing but an exhausted kind of relief. I climbed the 3 flights to my apartment, each step reminding me of new bruises forming under my clothes. The lock turned smoothly. Inside, everything looked exactly as I'd left it that morning. Dishes in the sink, nursing textbooks scattered across the coffee table, Megan's school photos on the refrigerator. Normal. Safe. Mine. I locked the door, engaged the chain, then checked every window twice. Old habits from 6 months of living with someone who used his fists when words failed him. Except now the person I was afraid of wouldn't be coming back. Sleep didn't come easily. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying Dominic's words. He'll be dealt with appropriately. The careful way Luca had forced Tyler into that car. The absolute certainty in Dominic's voice when he said Tyler would never bother anyone again. What had I done? What had I allowed to happen? But even as the question circled my mind, exhaustion pulled me under. Sunday morning brought rain against the windows and the shrill ring of my phone. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Miss Carter?" A woman's voice, professional and slightly concerned. "This is Officer Jennifer Mills with Chicago PD. We need to ask you some questions about Tyler Crawford." My stomach dropped. "What about him? When was the last time you saw Mr. Crawford?" I sat up slowly, mind racing. "Yesterday. Late afternoon. He came to my workplace. Rossi's restaurant on West Madison? Yes. And after that, he left. I don't know where he went. Not technically a lie. I didn't know where Luca had taken him. Mr. Crawford's vehicle was found abandoned near Montrose Harbor early this morning. His wallet and phone were inside. We're trying to establish a timeline of his movements yesterday evening." The rain picked up, drumming harder against the glass. I wrapped my free arm around myself, suddenly cold. "I don't know anything about that," I said. "We broke up. He showed up at my work drunk and angry. My manager had him removed." "Removed by whom?" "I don't know. Some customers helped. Everything happened so fast." Officer Mills was quiet for a moment. I could hear papers shuffling. "Miss Carter, we have a report that Mr. Crawford was physically aggressive with you yesterday. Is that accurate?" My hand went to my throat, to the tender bruises his fingers had left. "Yes. And you didn't call the police?" "It was over before I could." The customers intervened. More silence, more shuffling. "We may need you to come in for a formal statement. Someone will be in touch." The call ended. I sat holding the phone, staring at Tyler's contact information still saved in my contacts. Should I delete it? Keep it as evidence of what? My hands shook as I set the phone down. A knock at the door made me jump so hard I nearly fell off the bed. I approached cautiously, looked through the peephole. Dominic Marino stood in the hallway, holding a small black bag and 2 cups of coffee. I opened the door. "You didn't sleep," he observed, taking in my appearance. I was still wearing yesterday's clothes, hair tangled, face bare of the makeup I usually hid behind. "Not much. May I come in?" I stepped back, let him enter my small apartment. He looked out of place here, too polished and powerful for my second-hand furniture and peeling linoleum. But he moved through the space like he belonged, setting the coffee on my kitchen counter, opening the black bag to reveal medical supplies. "Sit," he said, gesturing to one of my mismatched kitchen chairs. "I'm fine. You're not. And lying about it doesn't help either of us." I sat. He pulled the other chair close, began examining my throat with gentle fingers. The bruises had darkened overnight, Tyler's handprint visible in purple and red. "This needs ice," Dominic said, standing to raid my freezer. He wrapped ice cubes in a dish towel, pressed it carefully against my neck. "Hold it there." 15 minutes. He returned to his bag, pulled out arnica gel, antibiotic ointment, bandages. Professional supplies, the kind that suggested he'd done this before. The police called, I said quietly. They found Tyler's car by the lake. Dominic's hands didn't pause in their work, spreading gel over the bruises on my wrist. What did you tell them? The truth. That he came to the restaurant drunk. That he was removed. That I don't know where he went after. Good. Is he dead? The question hung between us, heavy and unavoidable. Dominic finished treating my wrist, carefully wrapped it, then met my eyes directly. Tyler Crawford will never hurt you or anyone else again. That's all you need to know. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I'm giving you. His voice was firm, but not unkind. What happened to him was a consequence of his own actions. He put his hands on you. In my world, that has a price. I pulled my hand back, cradling it against my chest. Your world. What is your world exactly? Complicated. I gathered that much from the way everyone at the restaurant treats you. Dominic stood, moved to my kitchen sink, washed his hands with the same methodical care he'd shown treating my injuries. When he turned back, his expression held something I hadn't seen before. Vulnerability, maybe. Or just exhaustion. I grew up watching my father terrorize my mother, he said. Started when I was 5. Got worse every year. He'd come home drunk, find something wrong with dinner or the house or just the way she looked at him. Then he'd use his fists to correct her. He leaned against my counter, arms crossed, but his posture held tension that suggested the memories still cut deep. I was too small to stop it. Could only listen through my bedroom door while she tried not to scream. Tried not to wake me up even though I was already awake, already hearing everything. How old were you when it stopped? 16. I'd gotten big enough by then. Strong enough. Came home one day and found him beating her in the kitchen. Something snapped in me. He looked at his hands like they belonged to someone else. I put him in the hospital for 3 days. Told him if he ever touched her again, I'd kill him. Did he? No. Had a heart attack 6 months later. Doctor said it was stress and poor diet, but I think it was fear. Fear that next time I wouldn't stop at a warning. Rain continued its assault on the windows. Somewhere in the building, a baby cried. Normal sounds of normal life. My mother wasted 20 years on a man who saw her as property to damage. Dominic continued. By the time she was free, she'd forgotten who she'd been before him. That's what men like Tyler do. They don't just hurt you physically. They erase you piece by piece until there's nothing left but fear. I was going to leave, I said. After graduation. I had it planned. New city, new job. He wouldn't have been able to find me. Maybe. Or maybe he would have. And next time there wouldn't be anyone to pull him off you. Dominic moved back to the table, crouched down so we were eye level. I'm not asking for gratitude. I'm not asking for anything. But I need you to understand that what happened to Tyler wasn't random violence. It was protection. Of you. Of the next woman he would have hurt. Of everyone his existence threatened. The ice had melted in the towel I held against my throat. Dominic took it from me. Disappeared into my bathroom. Returned with a fresh, cold compress. The police will investigate, he said, pressing the new compress into my hand. They'll ask questions. They'll probably talk to you again. All you know is that Tyler showed up at your workplace drunk and aggressive. Customers intervened, and you never saw him after that. The truth. Selective truth. The safest truth. He stood, packed up his medical supplies with efficient movements. At my door, he paused. I'm having someone watch your building for the next few days. Why are you doing this? Because no one did it for my mother. Because I can. He opened the door, then looked back one more time. And because when I saw those bruises on your wrist Friday night, I recognized them. Recognized what they meant. What they would keep meaning if someone didn't stop it. Then he was gone, leaving me alone in my apartment with ice against my throat and questions I knew better than to ask. Monday brought more police. A detective this time, older, with tired eyes and a wedding ring worn thin from years of wear. He sat across from me in my living room, asking the same questions Officer Mills had asked, looking for inconsistencies that didn't exist because I'd told the truth. Just not all of it. You and Mr. Crawford were in a relationship for 2 years, Detective Williams said. reviewing his notes. Were there previous incidents of violence? Yes. Did you ever file a report? No. Why not? Because Tyler had convinced me it was my fault. Because filing a report would have made it real. Because I was ashamed. I gave the detective a simpler answer. I was scared. He nodded like he'd heard it before. Probably had. The customers who intervened at the restaurant Saturday night. Can you describe them? It happened fast. I was focused on breathing. But you saw them. Dark suits, professional looking. I didn't get names. The restaurant manager said one of them was Dominic Marino. My face remained carefully neutral. I don't know who that is. Detective Williams studied me for a long moment. We both knew I was lying. We both knew he couldn't prove it. Miss Carter, if you know something about Mr. Crawford's whereabouts, I don't. It would be better to tell us now. I told you everything I know. He left his card. Said to call if I remembered anything else. I put it in the drawer with Dominic's cards and tried not to think about how my life had become a collection of phone numbers I might never use. That afternoon, my phone rang again. Not police this time. A lawyer. A smooth voice with expensive diction, saying Dominic had retained his services on my behalf should I need legal representation during the investigation into Tyler's disappearance. I thanked him. Saved the number. Added it to the collection. Tyler Crawford had been gone for 48 hours. His car sat in an impound lot waiting for forensics that would find nothing useful. His apartment remained untouched. Rent paid through the end of the month by automatic withdrawal. And I went to class Monday evening like nothing had changed. Took notes on pharmacology and wound care. Practiced starting IVs on rubber arms that didn't bruise. Normal, safe, mine. The bruises on my throat would fade. The ones on my wrist already looked better thanks to Dominic's careful treatment. In a week, maybe 2, there would be no physical evidence Tyler had ever touched me. But I'd carry the weight of what I'd allowed to happen for much longer than that. 10 days passed with the strange rhythm of a life suspended between before and after. Tyler Crawford remained missing. His mother called me twice, voice shaking, asking if I knew anything. I told her the same thing I told the police. No. Detective Williams stopped by the restaurant once more. Asked the same questions in different words. Left with the same non-answers. And through it all, Dominic Marino appeared at Rossi's every night like clockwork. He never sat in anyone else's section. Never made a show of it. Just requested table 12, ordered dinner, left tips that Marco stopped commenting on after the 3rd night. We didn't talk much beyond the necessary exchange of orders and pleasantries, but his presence felt like a shield I hadn't known I needed. Thursday afternoon, I was between my pharmacology lecture and the start of my shift when my phone rang. Unknown number, but I'd started answering those since Tyler disappeared. Is this Hannah Carter? A woman's voice, professional but urgent. Yes? This is Northwestern Memorial Hospital. Your sister Megan Carter was brought in an hour ago following a motor vehicle accident. She's stable, but we need you here. The world tilted. My backpack slipped off my shoulder, hitting the sidewalk with a thud that barely registered. Is she okay? What happened? She has a concussion and we're monitoring for internal injuries. The doctor will explain everything when you arrive. How soon can you get here? I looked around the street corner where I'd stopped, calculating. Bus to the train to the hospital, maybe an hour if everything connected perfectly. Megan alone and scared for an hour. I'm coming now, I managed, already moving. The buses in Chicago ran on spite and prayer during rush hour. I stood at the stop, watching 3 pass by, too full to take more passengers, panic building with each minute. Megan was 16. She was supposed to be invincible. She was supposed to be the one thing in my life Tyler hadn't touched, hadn't ruined. A black car pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down, and Dominic looked out at me. Get in. I didn't question it. Didn't ask how he knew where I was or what I needed. Just yanked open the door and climbed into the back seat. Northwestern Memorial, I said. My sister Megan. She's in the emergency room. They said there was an accident. I know. He was already giving directions to his driver. I have people who monitor things that matter. You received a call 12 minutes ago from the hospital. I was 3 blocks away. The car moved through traffic with aggressive efficiency, the driver navigating gaps I wouldn't have attempted. I pressed my hands together to stop them shaking. "She's only 16, I said to no one in particular. "Our parents died 3 years ago. Car accident, drunk driver. She was 13. I promised them I'd take care of her." Dominic didn't offer empty reassurances. "Just let me talk." Tyler hated how much attention I gave her. Said I treated her like she was more important than him. She was. She is. She's the only family I have left. I looked at my hands, at the fading yellow bruises on my wrist. "If something happens to her, nothing is going to happen to her," Dominic said with certainty I desperately wanted to believe. "Northwestern has excellent trauma care. She's in the right place." We made it to the hospital in 17 minutes. Dominic followed me through the emergency room doors, and his presence somehow made the triage nurse move faster, call for the attending physician immediately instead of making me wait. Dr. Patel met us in a consultation room, a young woman with kind eyes and careful hands as she pulled up Megan's scans on a computer screen. "Your sister has a moderate concussion and bruised ribs from the seatbelt," she explained, pointing to the images. "We've done a CT scan that shows no internal bleeding. She was very lucky. The other driver ran a red light, T-boned the passenger side where Megan was sitting. If she'd been driving, we'd be having a different conversation. Relief hit so hard I had to sit down." Dominic's hand found my shoulder, steadying. "Can I see her?" "She's asking for you. Room 3. Megan looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, one side of her face swollen and bruised, an IV running into her left arm. But her eyes opened when I entered, and she tried to smile. "Hey," she said, voice hoarse. "Sorry, I know you had work." I sat in the chair beside her bed, took her uninjured hand. "Work doesn't matter. Nothing matters except you being okay. My friend's mom was driving. She's fine too. Her car is totaled, though." Megan's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Hannah. I know we can't afford hospital bills right now. Don't worry about that. But Tyler always said—" She stopped, awareness dawning. "Wait. Where is Tyler? He usually shows up when something happens to lecture me about being more careful." I'd been so focused on getting to the hospital I hadn't prepared for this question. Megan was smart, observant. She'd noticed Tyler's absence eventually, but I'd hoped for more time. "Tyler and I broke up," I said carefully. "He's not around anymore." "Good." The vehemence in her voice surprised me. "He was terrible to you." "I hated him." "Megan, I'm not stupid, Hannah. I saw the bruises. I heard him yelling through the phone. I just didn't know how to help." Fresh tears spilled over. "I should have done something." "Hey, no." I squeezed her hand gently. "This wasn't your job. You're 16. Taking care of you is my job, not the other way around." A soft knock interrupted us. Dominic stood in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee and a bottle of water. "They said she could have fluids," he said, offering me the water. Megan's eyes widened slightly, taking in Dominic's expensive suit, the way he moved through the hospital like he owned it. "Who's that?" "A friend. He gave me a ride here." "Some friend," she murmured, but she was too exhausted to push for details. Dr. Patel wanted to keep Megan overnight for observation. Standard protocol with concussions. I planned to stay with her, called Marco to explain I wouldn't make my shift. He was surprisingly understanding, probably because Dominic had already called ahead to inform him. When Megan finally fell asleep, sedated and monitored, I stepped into the hallway to find Dominic talking quietly with an administrator. They shook hands, and the woman walked away with a satisfied expression. "What was that about?" "Your sister is being moved to a private room with better monitoring equipment. Dr. Patel will remain her primary physician, but I've arranged for a neurologist to consult on her concussion protocols." "Dominic, I can't afford—" "You're not paying for any of this." His tone left no room for argument. "Medical bills, follow-up appointments, physical therapy if she needs it. It's handled. I can't accept that." "You can, and you will." He guided me to a quiet corner of the hallway, away from the nurses' station. "Consider it an investment in your future. You're 6 months from finishing nursing school. Can't have you dropping out because of medical debt. Why are you doing this? He was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. Because Tyler made you feel like you had to choose between your education and your sister. Between your future and your survival. I'm showing you that you don't. That there are people who can help without demanding pieces of yourself in return. The next 3 days established a pattern I simultaneously craved and feared. Dominic drove me to the hospital each morning before my classes, picked me up afterward to take me to evening visiting hours. Megan's condition improved steadily. The private room he'd arranged had a window overlooking Lake Michigan, equipment that beeped reassuringly through the nights I spent in the uncomfortable chair beside her bed. On the 4th day, Megan was discharged with strict instructions about rest and concussion monitoring. Dominic's driver brought us home, carried the flowers and cards Megan had received from her school friends, up 3 flights of stairs without complaint. After Megan was settled on the couch with instructions to watch mindless television and call if she felt dizzy, I walked Dominic down to the street where his car waited. "Thank you," I said, "for everything. I don't know how I would have managed without you. You would have found a way. You're resourceful." He opened the car door, paused. "I'll be at Rossi's tonight. Table 12. I'll be working." "I know." He drove away, and I climbed back upstairs to find Megan watching me through the window with calculating interest. That evening at the restaurant, I served Dominic his usual table. We didn't talk about the hospital or Megan or Tyler's absence. Just went through our familiar routine. Wine, appetizers, entrees, the kind of easy conversation that felt like coming home. Luca, the man who'd helped remove Tyler from the alley, sat with Dominic. As I cleared their dessert plates, I overheard fragments of conversation. "The Russian organization is asking questions," Luca said quietly. "They know you've been spending time with someone. They're looking for leverage. Then they'll be disappointed." Dominic's voice held steel. "Hannah is under my protection. That's not negotiable. Protection is one thing. But if this becomes more than that, if she becomes something you care about beyond obligation, they'll exploit it. You know how this works. I know exactly how it works, which is why I'm prepared." I pretended not to hear, moved to the next table, but the conversation stayed with me. Russian organization, leverage, exploitation. Words that painted a picture of danger I was only beginning to understand. When Dominic left that night, he placed his usual generous tip under his water glass, but underneath was a new card, with an address written in his handwriting. "Dinner," he said as he passed me. "Tomorrow night, not here. Somewhere we can actually talk." I pocketed the card and watched him leave, already knowing I'd go even as every rational part of my brain screamed that getting closer to Dominic Marino meant stepping deeper into a world that would change me in ways I couldn't predict. But he'd saved me from Tyler, cared for Megan without hesitation, shown me kindness that expected nothing in return. For the first time in 6 months, someone saw me as more than an obligation, or a target, or a burden. And that feeling was more dangerous than any Russian organization could ever be. Megan came home on a Wednesday afternoon, 2 weeks after the accident that had nearly given me a heart attack. The security system Dominic's people installed took 3 hours, involved cameras I couldn't see, and sensors on every window. The technician, a quiet man who spoke only when necessary, handed me a card with instructions and a number to call if anything malfunctioned. "Mr. Marino wants you to feel safe," he said before leaving. Megan watched the installation from the couch, ice pack against her ribs, curiosity written across her healing face. When we were finally alone, she didn't waste time. "So, who is he really?" she asked. "The guy who paid for my private room and the neurologist and apparently our new Fort Knox security system. Someone who helps people. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now." She studied me with 16-year-old wisdom that sometimes felt older than my 25 years. "Tyler's been gone for 2 weeks. The police haven't found him. And suddenly we have a mysterious benefactor who shows up everywhere you need him. I'm not stupid, Hannah." "I know you're not." "Did he kill Tyler?" The question landed like a physical blow. I sat down beside her, careful not to jostle her injured ribs. "What would you say if I told you I don't know for certain?" "I'd say Tyler deserved whatever happened to him." Her voice held steel I'd never heard before. "I'd say I'm glad he's gone and I hope he never comes back." "Megan, no, You need to hear this. I saw what he did to you. The bruises you thought you were hiding. The way you flinched when your phone rang. How you stopped laughing and stopped talking about your future like it mattered. Tears filled her eyes. I was terrified he was going to kill you, and I didn't know how to stop it. I pulled her into a careful hug, mindful of her injuries. It's over now. That's what matters. That night, after Megan fell asleep in her room, I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling and finally let myself ask the question I'd been avoiding. What had I done? I'd allowed Tyler to disappear. Hadn't called the police when Luca forced him into that car. Hadn't demanded answers when Dominic said he'd been dealt with appropriately. Just accepted it. Accepted the relief of Tyler's absence without questioning the method. Sleep came eventually, but with it came dreams. Tyler's face. The alley. His hands around my throat. But this time when Dominic pulled him away, I watched Tyler get dragged into darkness that swallowed him whole. Heard him screaming my name, begging me to help. I woke up gasping, sheets soaked with sweat, 3 a.m. glowing on my alarm clock. My hands shook as I got water from the kitchen, checked that Megan was still breathing peacefully in her room. Tried to convince myself that the nightmares didn't mean I was a terrible person. By the third night of the same dream, exhaustion had worn me down to nothing. Thursday evening, I showed up for my shift at Rossi's looking like I'd been through a war. Marco took one look at me and suggested I go home. I refused. Work meant routine, meant not thinking, meant serving Dominic at table 12 and pretending everything was fine. Except Dominic saw through it immediately. "You're not sleeping," he observed when I brought his wine. "I'm fine. You're not. When does your shift end?" "Midnight. I'll wait." He did. Sat at that table nursing drinks and working on his phone while the restaurant emptied around him. At 12:15, after I'd finished closing duties, he drove me home. But instead of dropping me at my building, he parked and turned to face me. "Talk to me. There's nothing to talk about." "Hannah, my name carried weight. You've barely slept in days. You look like you're being haunted. What's going on?" The dam broke. Everything I'd been holding back spilled out in a rush of words and tears, and guilt I hadn't known how to process. I keep dreaming about him. About Tyler. About what happened in that alley, except in the dreams I can see what comes after. Where you took him. What you did. And I wake up and I feel guilty. Except not because he's gone, but because I'm relieved he's gone. And what kind of person does that make me? Dominic let me talk, didn't interrupt, didn't judge. When I finally ran out of words, he was quiet for a long moment. "You think you should feel worse about his death?" he said finally. "You think the fact that you're relieved instead of devastated makes you complicit, makes you as bad as me, doesn't it?" "No." He turned in his seat to face me fully. "Hannah, listen to me. Men like Tyler don't stop. They escalate. Every time you take them back, every time you forgive them, they learn they can go further next time. That the consequences don't outweigh their desire to control you. But I could have left differently. Could have gone to the police, gotten a restraining order, and he would have violated it. Statistics show that restraining orders against domestic abusers are violated 75% of the time, and when they are violated, it often ends in murder." His voice was calm but firm. "Tyler was strangling you in that alley. Another 30 seconds and you'd be dead. The only thing I did was stop a murder in progress. You did more than stop it. Yes, I made sure he could never try again. With you or anyone else." He reached out, gently turned my face toward his. "You're not responsible for the choice I made. You're only responsible for surviving. And that's exactly what you did. It doesn't feel like surviving. It feels like I let someone die for me. Tyler chose his own fate when he put his hands on you, when he strangled you in an alley behind a restaurant. Every action has consequences. His were just more permanent than he anticipated." We sat in the car as Chicago moved around us. Late-night traffic and distant sirens and the ordinary sounds of a city that kept going regardless of individual tragedies. "The nightmares will fade," Dominic said quietly. "Give yourself time to process. Don't force yourself to feel guilt you don't actually feel just because you think you should." "How do you know?" "Because I've lived with the consequences of violence my entire life. and I've learned that sometimes the only moral choice is the one that keeps people alive. He drove me home, walked me up to my door, waited while I checked on Megan. Before he left, he turned back. "I'm at the restaurant tomorrow night. Same table. If you need to talk more, I'll be there." Friday night, I served him dinner like always. But this time, when the restaurant closed and the kitchen staff left, I found him waiting by the back door. We stood in the empty kitchen, industrial ovens cooling, overhead lights casting harsh shadows. "I'm okay," I said. "Or I will be. The nightmares are already less frequent." "Good. But I need to know something. Was it quick? When it ended, did he suffer?" Dominic's expression softened slightly. "He didn't suffer. That's all I'll tell you." The relief that washed through me should have felt wrong. Instead, it felt like the first full breath I'd taken in days. He stepped closer, and suddenly the space between us felt charged with something beyond gratitude or protection. His hand came up, cupped my face with gentleness that contradicted everything I knew about who he was and what he did. "I shouldn't," he said. "Getting involved with you beyond keeping you safe is selfish and dangerous," and I kissed him before he could finish the thought. He tasted like the wine he'd been drinking, like something expensive and forbidden. His arms came around me, pulling me against him with careful strength, and for the first time in my life I understood the difference between being taken and being held. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. "This complicates everything," he murmured. "I know. My world isn't safe. Being close to me makes you a target for people who want to hurt me. I'm already in it. Already a target after Tyler. Running won't change that." His thumb traced my cheekbone. "Then we do this carefully. Slowly. And you tell me the moment it becomes too much." The next week unfolded like discovering a foreign country. Dominic introduced me to aspects of his life gradually, testing boundaries, showing me pieces of himself beyond the man who'd saved me in an alley. Sunday dinner at his mother's house, a modest home in a quiet neighborhood where she lived with a full-time nurse and security that pretended to be landscaping. She was in her early 60s, elegant and warm, and she looked at her son with the kind of love that suggested she'd forgiven him for whatever darkness he'd inherited from his father. "You're the girl from the restaurant," she said, taking my hands. "Dominic told me about you, about how brave you were. I wasn't brave. I was terrified. Brave is being terrified and surviving anyway." Monday, he took me to one of his legitimate businesses, an import warehouse filled with Italian wines and olive oils and artisanal foods. Showed me the paperwork, the customs documentation, the completely legal operation that employed 40 people and turned a solid profit. "This is what I'm building toward," he said. "Eventually, this will be all of it. No more protection, no more gray area operations, just business." "How long?" "Years. Some obligations can't be walked away from overnight, but I'm working toward it." Luca became a more regular presence, sitting with Dominic at dinner, engaging me in conversation that felt like gentle vetting, making sure I understood what I was getting into without stating it outright. "He's different with you," Luca said one night when Dominic stepped away to take a call. "Lighter, more like who he was before his father died and all the weight landed on him." "What was he like before?" "Idealistic. Thought he could change things from the inside. Make the family legitimate through sheer force of will." Luca smiled. "Turns out it's harder than that. But he hasn't stopped trying. By the end of the week, my world had expanded in ways I couldn't have imagined 2 weeks earlier. I still went to class, still worked my shifts, still checked on Megan and helped her with homework. But now there was this other life layered underneath, full of complications I was only beginning to understand. Friday night, Dominic met me after my shift. We walked along Lake Michigan, cold October wind making me grateful for the jacket he'd thought to bring for me. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "About me? Because once you're really in, once people know you matter to me, there's no going back to invisible." I thought about Tyler's hands around my throat, about Megan in that hospital bed, about the nightmares that were finally fading, about how Dominic had shown me kindness without expectation, protection without possession, I'm sure. He pulled me close, kissed me under the Chicago skyline, and I felt the last piece of my old life slip away, replaced by something I couldn't name yet but desperately wanted to keep. 3 weeks into whatever Dominic and I were calling this, I'd started to believe maybe dangerous could coexist with normal, that I could finish nursing school, take care of Megan, and somehow exist in the orbit of a man whose world operated by rules I was only beginning to understand. Tuesday evening shattered that illusion. I was leaving my pharmacology lecture at 7 p.m. October darkness already settled over the city. The campus parking lot was half empty, streetlights casting pools of yellow across cracked pavement. I'd taken the bus from work, walked the 3 blocks to class, and was heading back toward the stop when the black sedan pulled up beside me. Not Dominic's car. Wrong make, wrong feel. The back door opened before I could process the threat. Get in. The man's accent was thick, Eastern European. Russian, maybe. He held something under his jacket that looked like the shape of a gun. I backed up. No. Miss Carter, you will... A second car materialized from nowhere, screeching between us with enough force to make the Russian vehicle swerve. Luca emerged from the driver's seat, gun already drawn, flanked by 2 other men I recognized from Dominic's security detail. Back up, Luca ordered, his usual easy demeanor replaced by something cold and lethal. Now. The Russian car hesitated for 3 seconds that felt like hours. Then it peeled away, tires screaming, disappearing into Chicago traffic. Luca holstered his weapon, turned to me. You're unhurt? Yes. What just happened? Get in the car. Dominic's waiting. The drive to wherever we were going took 20 minutes through neighborhoods I didn't recognize. Luca made 3 calls in rapid Italian, his tone suggesting this was very bad. Finally, we pulled up to a restaurant I'd never been to, upscale and clearly closed despite it being dinner hours. Dominic met us at the door. The fury in his eyes made me take a step back. Inside, he said quietly. Too quietly. The restaurant's main dining room had been cleared except for one table where papers and laptops were spread out. Luca went straight there, started pulling up what looked like surveillance footage. Dominic guided me to a different corner, hands on my shoulders, checking for injuries I didn't have. I'm fine, I said. Luca got there before anything happened. Before anything happened this time. His jaw was tight, that scar on his chin standing out white against flushed skin. The Russians have been watching you for days, waiting for an opening. My stomach dropped. Why? Because you matter to me. Because hurting you hurts me, and they want leverage. He released me, paced away, ran both hands through his hair. This is my fault. I knew the risk, knew they'd been asking questions, and I let you stay visible anyway. Luca called from across the room. The plates are registered to a shell company we've tracked to the Volkov operation. They're based north of the city. Been trying to move into port territory for 6 months. How many men do they have? Dominic asked. 30, maybe 40. Enough to be a problem. I moved closer to the table, looked at the surveillance footage playing on the laptop. Me leaving my apartment that morning, walking to the bus stop, entering Rossi's, going to class. They'd been following me all day. What do they want? My voice sounded steadier than I felt. You, Dominic said bluntly, as leverage to force me into giving up port access. Or as revenge if I refuse. He turned to face me fully. I can arrange protection. Federal witness protection. New identity for you and Megan. Relocation to another state. You'd be safe, completely removed from my world. No. Hannah, listen to me. No. I crossed my arms, held his gaze. I'm not running. I'm not starting over in some random city away from everything I know. And I'm sure as hell not letting these people dictate my life. They tried to kidnap you an hour ago, and your people stopped them. That's what you do, right? Protect what's yours? Something flickered in his expression at that phrasing. This isn't a game. These men are violent, organized, and they will hurt you to get to me. Then what do you suggest? Because witness protection means never seeing you again. Never finishing school here. Never being Hannah Carter anymore. My hands were shaking, but I kept my voice firm. I just got free from Tyler controlling every aspect of my life. I'm not trading that for a different kind of prison. Luca cleared his throat. There's a middle option. Safe house outside the city. Full security. Isolated property. Give us time to negotiate with the Volkovs. Or neutralize the threat entirely. A few weeks, maybe a month. Dominic looked at me. You and Megan both. Temporary relocation until this is resolved. Megan just got back to normal after the accident. You want me to pull her out of school, away from her friends. I want you alive, Dominic cut in. Both of you. Everything else is negotiable. The weight of it hit me then. This was the price of being close to him. Not just accepting what he'd done to Tyler, but becoming a target myself. Dragging Megan into danger she'd never asked for. How long? I asked quietly. 2 weeks minimum, possibly longer depending on how negotiations go. I thought about Megan, about the security system already on our apartment, the way she'd started sleeping through the night again without nightmares, about taking her somewhere isolated where she'd feel like a prisoner. But I also thought about that Russian car, about the man with something gun-shaped under his jacket, about what would have happened if Luca hadn't been following me. I need to tell Megan myself, explain everything, no more half-truths. Dominic nodded. We pack tonight. You're both moved by midnight. The safe house turned out to be a mansion an hour north of Chicago, set back from the main road behind gates and walls that looked like they could withstand a military assault. 6 bedrooms, modern kitchen, and enough security equipment to run a small surveillance operation. Megan stood in the marble foyer, backpack still on her shoulder, looking around with wide eyes. This is insane, she said. I know. How long are we here? I don't know. A few weeks, maybe. She turned to face me fully. And this is because of Dominic? Because people want to hurt him through you? Yes. So we're prisoners. We're protected. Same thing. But her voice held resignation rather than anger. She'd processed enough trauma in the past month to understand that safety sometimes looked like confinement. That night, after the security team did their final sweep and Dominic's driver returned to the city, I sat Megan down in one of the upstairs bedrooms and told her everything, who Dominic really was, what he controlled, why people were after him, what had actually happened to Tyler. She listened without interrupting, her 16-year-old face aging years in the span of my confession. You should have told me sooner, she said finally. I was trying to protect you. From what? The truth? Hannah, I'm not a kid. She stood, moved to the window overlooking dark grounds lit by security lights. Tyler's gone because Dominic killed him. We're here because Dominic's enemies want revenge. Our entire lives changed because you fell in love with someone dangerous. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. She turned back. I hated Tyler. I was terrified every day that he'd finally go too far and I'd come home to find you dead. At least this danger comes with actual protection, instead of just more violence. Over the next 2 weeks, the mansion became our entire world. Dominic visited 3 or 4 times. Always at night. Always with Luca and extra security. During those visits, he and I found spaces to be alone. Conversations that stretched into early morning. The Volkovs are negotiating, he told me one night while we sat in the library overlooking the grounds. Other Italian families in the region are backing me. They understand that letting Russians gain a foothold sets a bad precedent. What happens when this is over? Depends how it ends. If we reach an agreement, territorial boundaries get redrawn. They keep what they have, we keep ours, everyone stays in their lanes. And if you don't reach an agreement? His silence was answer enough. I'm trying to do this differently, he said after a long pause. My father would have gone to war immediately. Bodies, headlines, chaos. I'm attempting diplomacy backed by the threat of force rather than immediate violence. It's slower, more complicated, but fewer people die. That's why you want to go legitimate eventually. You're tired of this. I'm tired of choosing between bad options and worse ones, of measuring decisions and potential casualties. He pulled me closer, and I rested against his shoulder. When I saw that footage of you being approached today, when I realized how close they'd come to taking you, I wanted to burn their entire operation to the ground. But you didn't. No, because that's what they expect. What they want, probably. Give them justification for escalation. Turn this into open warfare. His arm tightened around me. You make me want better outcomes. More careful choices. A future that isn't just measured in body counts and territory. During the day, while Dominic was handling business in the city, Megan and I fell into a strange routine. I did classwork remotely, my professors accommodating after I cited family emergency. Megan video called her friends, kept up with schoolwork, complained about missing her boyfriend, and slowly adjusted to our gilded cage. "You really love him," she observed one afternoon while we made lunch in the massive kitchen. "I think I do. Even knowing what he is? Maybe because of what he is. He's honest about it. Doesn't pretend to be something cleaner than reality. I thought about Tyler, who'd seem normal and safe until he wasn't. I'd rather have dangerous and transparent than normal and secretly violent. That's kind of messed up." "Yeah, it probably is." The second week, Dominic arrived with news that negotiations were progressing. The Volkovs had agreed to a summit meeting, neutral territory, all major families represented. If it went well, Hannah and Megan could go home within days. "And if it doesn't go well?" I asked. "Then we're here longer while I handle it another way." That night, lying beside him in the massive bedroom, I asked the question I'd been avoiding. "What happens after? When we go back to Chicago and this is resolved, what do you want to happen?" "I want to finish school. Keep working at Rossi's until I graduate. Take care of Megan." I paused. "And I want to keep seeing you. Keep this, whatever it is. It won't be safe. Even after the Russians back down, there will be others. People who see you as weakness to exploit." "I know. And you still want it?" I thought about the past month. About Tyler's death and Megan's accident and Russian kidnappers and living in a mansion that was really a prison. About Dominic's hands treating my bruises with gentleness Tyler had never shown. About the way he looked at me like I mattered more than territory or power, or any of the things his world valued. I still want it. He kissed me then, slow and deep, and for those few hours the danger and complications faded into something simpler. Just two people choosing each other despite every reasonable argument against it. 3 days later, Luca arrived with news that the summit had succeeded. Terms agreed, boundaries set, peace established. We could go home. Megan actually cried with relief. I felt it too. That desperate need for normal life, even though I knew normal would never look quite the same again. Dominic drove us back to Chicago personally, made sure the apartment security was reinforced, stayed while we unpacked the few things we'd taken. Before he left, he pulled me aside. "This won't be the last threat. You understand that?" "I understand. And you're still choosing this. Choosing me. I'm still choosing you." He left, and I stood in my small apartment that felt enormous after 2 weeks in a mansion, and tried to convince myself I'd made the right decision. Megan appeared beside me, backpack over her shoulder, heading to her room. "You did, you know," she said. "Did what?" "Make the right choice. For both of us." She smiled slightly. "At least this way we know what we're up against." Returning to normal life felt like trying to fit into clothes that no longer matched my shape. Everything looked the same on the surface. My apartment, my shifts at Rossi's, my nursing classes. But I moved through it all like a ghost, hyper-aware of the security cameras Dominic's people had installed, the way Luca's men watched from unmarked cars on my street. The weight of knowing I'd chosen this. 3 days after coming back from the safe house, Dominic asked me to dinner. Not at a restaurant, but at a brownstone in a quiet neighborhood I'd never visited. Luca drove me there, silent and professional, then disappeared once Dominic opened the door. "This is one of my properties," Dominic explained, leading me through tastefully furnished rooms. "I use it for meetings that need privacy. Tonight, it's just us." He'd cooked. Actual cooking, not takeout disguised on nice plates. Pasta with a sauce that smelled like someone's grandmother had spent hours perfecting it. Fresh bread. Wine that probably cost more than my textbooks. "You cook?" I asked, surprised. "My mother insisted I learn. Said no woman should have to take care of a man who couldn't feed himself." He plated the food with careful attention. She was very clear about what kind of man my father wasn't, what kind of man I should become instead. We ate at a small table overlooking a garden lit by string lights. For 20 minutes we talked about nothing important. My pharmacology exam, his meeting with suppliers, Megan's school projects, normal conversation that felt surreal given everything underneath it. Finally, Dominic set down his fork and met my eyes directly. "The Russian situation is resolved. Completely. Territory agreements are in place, backed by every major Italian family from Chicago to Milwaukee to Detroit. The Volkovs understand that touching you means war with organizations they can't afford to fight. Relief washed through me. So we're safe. From them, yes. But Hannah, there will always be others. Smaller operations looking for leverage, rivals from other cities, federal investigations that might try to use you as pressure. You'll never be completely invisible again. I'd known this was coming. Had spent 3 days thinking about it, playing out scenarios, trying to imagine futures that diverged at this single decision point. I can arrange everything, Dominic continued. New identities for you and Megan. A city of your choice, somewhere far from Chicago. Jobs already arranged, housing set up, enough money that you'd never worry about finances. You could finish nursing school anywhere, start fresh where no one knows your connection to me. And you? I'd stay here, continue what I'm doing. We'd have no contact for your own protection. It would be like we never met. The thought made my chest tighten. 6 months ago, I would have taken that offer without hesitation. Safety, security, escape from everything complicated. But 6 months ago, I'd been a different person. What's the alternative? You stay. Accept that being with me means living with calculated risks. Understanding that I can protect you better than anyone, but I can't eliminate danger completely. He reached across the table, took my hand. It means choosing me despite every rational argument against it. Can I have time to think? Take whatever you need. I spent the next 3 days in a fog of decision-making. Classes felt distant, work automatic. Every spare moment I ran through possibilities, consequences, futures that split like roads diverging. Friday evening, I sat Megan down in our living room and laid out everything. The offer, the alternatives, the fact that staying in Chicago meant accepting permanent risk. She listened without interrupting, her 16-year-old face serious in a way that made her look older. "What do you want to do?" she asked when I finished. "I don't know." "That's why I'm asking you. This affects your life too. Hannah, you've spent 3 years making decisions based on what's best for me. What keeps me safe, what gives me opportunities. You stayed with Tyler longer than you should have because leaving would have meant financial instability for both of us. You work 2 jobs and take night classes so I can stay in a decent school district." She leaned forward. "For once, make a decision based on what you want. I want both things. I want you safe and I want him. Then stay. We have better security now than we did with Tyler, and that's saying something. At least this danger comes with people actively protecting us instead of being the source of the danger." Saturday, I met Luca at a coffee shop near campus. He'd suggested it, said Dominic wanted me to talk to someone who'd been in this world longer, who could give me perspective without emotional investment. "He told you to be honest with me," I said after we both had coffee. "He told me to tell you the truth, even the parts that make him look bad." Luca stirred sugar into his espresso. "So here it is. Being with Dominic means you'll always be looking over your shoulder. It means teaching Megan to check under her car before starting it. It means never posting your location on social media, never getting too comfortable, never fully trusting people outside our circle." That sounds exhausting. It is. But it also means you'll have protection most people can't imagine. Resources, connections, people who will move heaven and earth to keep you safe because keeping you safe keeps him whole. Luca set down his spoon. "I've worked for Dominic for 15 years. Watched him build this organization from the ground up after his father died. He's careful, strategic, and he doesn't make mistakes often. But you, Hannah, you're his biggest vulnerability and his greatest motivation to do better, to be better." "How do you mean?" "He's been talking about going fully legitimate for years. Empty talk, mostly, because the reality is complicated and messy and takes time. But since he met you, he's actually taking steps, delegating operations he doesn't want to be involved in anymore, building legitimate businesses that can sustain the family without criminal activity, planning an exit strategy that actually has teeth." Luca met my eyes. "You make him want a future that isn't measured in territory and violence. That's rare. That's worth something." Monday morning, I called Dominic and told him my decision. "I'm staying. Megan and I both. But I have conditions." "Name them." "I finish my last semester without interference. No pulling me out of class for emergencies unless someone is literally dying. Megan goes to school normally, has friends, dates when she's ready. I don't want her growing up afraid. Agreed. And I don't want to know details about the parts of your business that aren't legal. If you have to do something, do it. But don't bring it home. Don't make me complicit by knowing. His pause lasted 3 seconds. That's fair. Anything else? Yeah. No lies between us about the big things. I can handle brutal honesty better than comfortable deception. I can do that. That week, Dominic's people upgraded our apartment security again. Better cameras, reinforced locks, panic buttons in every room that connected directly to Luca's phone. Megan complained it felt like living in a bunker. I told her bunkers kept people alive. Thursday evening, Dominic took me to meet his mother properly. Not the brief introduction we'd had before, but a real dinner where I was being presented as someone important. She lived in a modest home in a quiet suburb, the kind of place that looked completely ordinary from the outside. Inside, it was warm and full of photos. Dominic at various ages, relatives I didn't recognize, candid shots that captured joy I hadn't seen much of in his current life. "Hannah," she said, taking my hands in both of hers. "Dominic told me what you've been through. What you survived." I glanced at him, uncertain how much she knew. "She knows everything," he said quietly. "I don't keep secrets from my mother. Then you know I'm not exactly an ideal choice for your son." Her laugh was warm and genuine. Ideal according to whom? The people who think my family is cursed? The ones who see Dominic as nothing more than his father's legacy? She guided me to the couch, sat beside me. "Let me tell you something. I spent 20 years with a man who saw me as property, who used his fists whenever I showed independence or questioned his decisions. I survived, but barely, and I lived every day terrified that my son would become him." She looked at Dominic, who stood near the kitchen, giving us space. But he didn't. He saw what his father was and chose to be different. Chose to protect instead of dominate. To build instead of destroy. Her attention returned to me, and then he met you. And for the first time, I saw him look at someone the way I wished his father had looked at me, like you were a person, not a possession. Like your safety mattered more than his pride. "I don't know if I'm strong enough for this life. You survived an abusive relationship. You're raising your sister while putting yourself through nursing school. You looked at my son's world and chose to stay despite having every reason to run." She squeezed my hands. "You're stronger than you think." Dinner was comfortable after that. Stories about Dominic as a child, embarrassing moments his mother shared while he protested. Normal family dynamics that felt impossible given everything else. When we left, his mother hugged me tightly at the door. "Take care of each other," she said. "That's all that matters in the end." In the car driving back to my apartment, Dominic was quiet. Finally, he spoke. "She likes you. I like her too. She's been through hell. She has. That's why I needed you to meet her. To understand why I reacted the way I did when I saw your bruises that first night. Why Tyler's fate was sealed the moment he put his hands on you. Because she was never protected. Because she was never protected. And I was too young to stop it until I wasn't. And I swore that any woman in my life would never experience what she did." We pulled up to my building. Dominic walked me upstairs. Checked the apartment, despite security saying everything was clear. Kissed me goodnight with the kind of tenderness that still surprised me. After he left, I stood at my window watching his car disappear into Chicago traffic. Megan appeared beside me, backpack over her shoulder, heading to her room. "You made the right choice," she said. "How do you know?" "Because you look alive again. Like you did before Tyler. Like you remember what it's like to want something instead of just surviving." She squeezed my shoulder. "That's worth fighting for." I thought about Tyler, about the Russian car, about 2 weeks in a safe house that felt like a gilded prison, about Dominic's hands treating bruises with gentleness, his mother's story of surviving 2 decades of abuse, Luca's pragmatic honesty about the costs and benefits of this life. It wasn't a fairy tale, wasn't safe or simple or anything resembling normal, but it was mine, chosen with full knowledge of the consequences. And for the first time since my parents died, since Tyler's first closed fist, Since the weight of the world landed on my shoulders, I felt like I was living, instead of just enduring. That would have to be worth the risks we were taking. 6 months after that rainy Friday night, when Dominic Marino first noticed bruises on my wrist, I walked across a stage in a black cap and gown to accept my nursing degree. My hands didn't shake when they called my name. I'd earned every credit hour through night classes and clinical rotations that left me exhausted, through Tyler's abuse and his disappearance, through Russian threats and 2 weeks in a safe house, through choosing a life that looked nothing like the safe, normal future I'd once imagined. Megan sat in the 3rd row, screaming loud enough that people turned to stare. Beside her, Dominic stood clapping, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my entire education. His mother sat on his other side, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. They'd all come. My strange, complicated family held together by choice rather than blood. After the ceremony, we went to dinner at a restaurant overlooking Lake Michigan. Not Rossi's, where I still picked up occasional shifts when Marco needed help. Somewhere nicer, where Dominic had reserved a private room, and the menu didn't list prices. To Hannah, his mother said, raising her wine glass, who worked harder than anyone I know to get here. To New Beginnings, Luca added from his seat at the end of the table. To my sister, Megan said, who's basically a superhero disguised as a normal person. I blinked back tears, overwhelmed by how much had changed in half a year. The hospital job had started 2 weeks ago. Northwestern Memorial, ironically the same place where Megan had been treated after her accident. I worked the emergency department 3 12-hour shifts a week, saw everything from gunshot wounds to heart attacks to kids who'd swallowed things they shouldn't have. It was exactly what I'd trained for. Exactly what I'd dreamed about during those endless shifts at Rossi's. And somehow, I'd gotten here, despite everything. Life had settled into a rhythm I never expected to find. Monday through Wednesday, I wore scrubs and helped save lives. Thursday and Friday, I occasionally picked up shifts at the restaurant because I genuinely enjoyed it now that I wasn't dependent on the tips. Weekends belonged to studying for my nursing boards and spending time with Dominic. Megan had processed the initial shock of our new reality and adapted with the resilience only teenagers seem to possess. She'd become friends with Luca's 15-year-old niece, Sophia, who understood what it meant to have family members in complicated business. They did homework together, complained about teachers, went to movies with security Megan barely noticed anymore. Her grades had actually improved. Turned out not living in constant fear of Tyler's explosions freed up mental energy for things like calculus and chemistry. She's thriving, her guidance counselor had told me during parent-teacher conferences. Whatever changes you made at home, keep doing them. If she only knew. Dominic had kept his promises too. Over the past 6 months, I'd watched him systematically delegate operational control to Luca and a council of advisors. He still attended meetings, still commanded respect, still held final authority. But the day-to-day violence, the direct involvement in activities I didn't want to know about, he'd stepped back from. Instead, he focused on the legitimate businesses, the import warehouses, the restaurants, the real estate holdings. Building something that could sustain without criminal revenue. It'll take years, he told me one night while we lay in his bed overlooking the Chicago skyline. Some obligations can't be walked away from overnight. Some relationships require maintenance, but I'm working toward it. I know you are. Does it bother you that I can't just leave it all behind immediately? I'd thought about that question for a long time before answering. No, because you're honest about it. You don't pretend to be something you're not, and you're actually trying, which is more than most people in your position would do. We'd established rules that made it work. I didn't ask about the parts of his business that operated in shadows. He didn't bring problems home that would force me to know details I couldn't unknow. When he had to handle something, he handled it. When he came back, we didn't discuss it. Trust built on brutal honesty about what we could and couldn't share. It wasn't perfect. Some nights I woke up from nightmares about Tyler, about Russian cars, about dangers I couldn't see. Some nights Dominic came home tense and distant, carrying weight he wouldn't let me share. But we were building something real, messy and complicated and nothing like the fairy tales, but real. After dinner, Dominic suggested we walk along the lakefront, despite April's lingering cold. Megan and his mother headed home with Luca, giving us space that felt deliberate. Lake Michigan stretched dark and endless beside us, Chicago's lights reflecting off the water in fractured patterns. We walked in comfortable silence, his hand warm in mine, until he stopped at an overlook where the skyline framed perfectly behind us. "Hannah," he turned to face me fully. "The past 6 months have been the best of my life, and the most terrifying." Terrifying how? Because I've spent my entire adult life controlling variables, minimizing risks, building structures that protect what matters. He pulled a small box from his jacket pocket. "But you're a variable I can't control. And somehow that makes you more important than anything else." My breath caught. The box was velvet, dark blue, clearly holding jewelry. "This isn't a traditional proposal," he continued. "I can't promise you a normal life. Can't promise there won't be more threats, more complications, more moments where you question whether this is worth it." He opened the box, revealing a ring with a single diamond, elegant and understated. "But I'm promising that I will spend every day working toward giving you the safest, freest life I can build, that you and Megan will always be protected, that I will never stop trying to deserve you." I stared at the ring, at his face, at the vulnerable hope in his dark eyes. "You're asking me to marry you. I'm asking you to build a future with me, knowing what that means, knowing what I am and what I'm trying to become." He took the ring from the box. No illusions, no false promises, just commitment to keep choosing each other despite everything working against us. 6 months ago, I'd been a different person. Trapped with Tyler, surviving rather than living, believing my future was measured in semesters completed and bills paid rather than dreams realized. Now, I stood on the shore of Lake Michigan with a man who'd killed for me, protected me, showed me what it meant to be valued rather than possessed. A man whose world was dangerous and complicated, and nothing I'd ever imagined wanting. And I knew my answer before he finished speaking. Yes. He slid the ring onto my finger with hands that trembled slightly. Then he kissed me while Chicago moved around us, oblivious to the small miracle of 2 people choosing impossible love over safe loneliness. We didn't tell anyone immediately. Kept it private for a week, learning how the weight of the ring felt, adjusting to the promise it represented. But eventually, word spread. His mother cried and hugged me so tightly I couldn't breathe. Luca shook his head with a smile that suggested he'd seen this coming long before we did. Megan screamed and demanded to be maid of honor, despite the wedding being theoretical and far in the future. Life continued its strange rhythm. I worked my hospital shifts, helped trauma victims and cardiac arrests and everything in between. Dominic attended meetings, expanded businesses, gradually built the infrastructure for eventual legitimacy. 2 weeks after the engagement, I was finishing a particularly brutal 12-hour shift when my phone buzzed with a text from Megan. "Got an A on my calculus exam. Sophia and I are celebrating with pizza. Don't wait up." I smiled, sent back congratulations, and headed for the exit. The emergency department was finally quiet after hours of chaos. My scrubs were stained, my feet hurt, and I wanted nothing more than sleep. Dominic's car idled at the curb, him leaning against it with that same intense focus he'd shown the first night we met. "You didn't have to pick me up." "I wanted to." He opened the door. "Megan texted me too. Figured you'd be exhausted." During the drive back to my apartment, which I still maintained even though I spent most nights at his place, I watched Chicago slide past the windows. The city that had been backdrop to Tyler's abuse, to Russian threats, to transformation I never saw coming. "What are you thinking?" Dominic asked. "That 6 months ago I couldn't have imagined this. Any of it. Is that good or bad?" I looked at the ring on my left hand, at the man beside me who'd walked into a burning alley to save me, at the life we were building from impossibility. "It's good. Complicated and messy and nothing like I planned. But good." He reached over, laced his fingers through mine. We drove through Chicago, while the city breathed around us, full of other people living other complicated lives. Somewhere, Detective Williams had probably closed Tyler Crawford's missing persons case as cold. Somewhere, the Russian organization went about their business in territories we'd negotiated. Somewhere, people I'd never meet were making choices that would ripple through worlds I'd never fully understand. But in this car, With this man, wearing this ring and carrying knowledge of who I'd become, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not safety. Not certainty. Just peace with the choices I'd made and the future I was building. It would never be a fairy tale. Would always carry risks normal people never faced. But it was mine. Chosen consciously. Built on foundation of honesty rather than illusion. And that was worth everything I'd survived to get here.